Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode number 13 in the book of 1 Timothy. We're going through qualifications of pastors, teachers, shepherds, and yesterday we looked at submission being an essential life skill that's generally learned in the home, and the pastor should be teaching his children this, and it's an important character and quality and a qualification of elders. So what's true in your house will often also be true in God's house. That's why it's important. Well, today we're going to go on and look at some final characteristics of being a shepherd of God's people. 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 6. He must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit and fall into the condemnation of the devil. Moreover, he must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into a snare of the devil. So the puffed up part of that, I'm going to title this Stung by 1,000 Bees. So not a recent. Let's talk about that. Time is used to manifest or percolate some of the characteristics of being a Christian, and continuance is the test of reality. And time is the window of the truth. So it's probably better to have a guy who's not newly planted, and you wait on the new plants until there's some spiritual fruit, and wait for there's some spiritual trophies under his belt to see if he's going to stand the test of time. All right, he must not be a recent convert, or he may become puffed up with conceit. So not puffed up. Remember, we talked a couple days ago about teaching. So one of the characteristics of pastors in particular is that they are supposed to be skilled in teaching, be able to teach. And if you're teaching and you have exposure to the Lord and exposure to the Word, three things should happen, in my opinion. You should be struck by your sin. You should be shattered by the encounter, that is, broken to pieces. And then finally, you should shut your mouth, in the sense that, like Job, we come to the Lord with our hand over the mouth and with great humility. Well, puffed up is exactly the opposite of that. It's where you're conceited, you're prideful, and you've fallen into an arrogance, and it's actually an insane arrogance. It's crazy that you're doing it this way. So, for example, to be prideful is to be wrong, like insanely wrong. Like, what are you thinking? And swollen with conceit. So the picture I want to leave is to being stung by 1,000. You ever see somebody with an allergy and they get, step on a beehive and they get stung by 1,000 bees and they puff up like this, sort of a monster? That's the view of this prideful person. So the appointment to being a leader, elder, overseer, shepherd, and teacher, that's one office, is a temptation in and of itself. So you don't want a person who gets swollen by the bee stings of pride. Do you want a guy who's stung by bees, or a guy who is on his knees? That's my little soundbite. So it's not just a wielding and a using of the authority. The concern is that this person could start well regarding pride, but not finish well. So you're looking for pride before you pick the person. Then you want humility on the first day, and you'd like to have humility on the last day as well. So it's best not to start with a person who demonstrates ongoing unrepented pridefulness, and then engage him in pride-tempting leadership. Or here's what it says can happen. You can fall into the condemnation of the devil. That is, you can fall into the same hole, the same error that he fell into. And so it's a very specific snare. And then the irony of this is the devil, who's sitting in the pit, in the snare that he's been trapped in, and he gets this idea is like, hey, I'm going to tempt other people with this exact thing. He's the president of the pride club at school, and it's a trap he knows well, and he wishes pastors to be fooled, to be ensnared in this. Why? Because of the disgrace that follows it. So there's three steps to this. There's this trap, the temptation to start with. That's step number one. Then there's the tumbling, the trap, and then the tumbling. The tumbling is the fall. That's before it becomes public. and then there's the TV or the thoughts of others. That's when it becomes public, and it's this disgrace part. So think about this: who gets disgraced when a pastor falls? Is it just him, or is it the people that he represents and the people that he leads as well? And for pastors that have fallen into disgrace, I cannot think of an example where their flocks, benefited well from this. I don't think it's a good technique for church growth and kingdom growth. It's not a recipe for church blessing in the lives of their people. So the devil snares to harm the pastor and then to disgrace the pastor and harm those he leads. So his fall results in the betrayal. I recently saw a documentary about a pastor who fell kind of spectacularly, and the way he described it was, I betrayed the trust of thousands of people. And I thought that was actually very, very insightful. Okay, so my prayer then is, first of all, my advice is check out humility before you give a person the office. The second thing is then pray. Pray for humility on the first day, on the day of laying on of hands of your pastor, but then humility on the last day and every day in between. And the eyes, let's keep aware that these men who we put in this office, and I've prayed for my elders today, that they would have eyes to see the condemnation of the devil. That is the same error of his ways, the same snare that he fell into, and give my elders a door of escape, and that they may take the humble door. 4, don't we want leaders that have not been swollen by conceit? Don't we want leaders that haven't been stung by 1,000 bees? We don't want a guy who's stung by bees. We want a guy who's on his knees of humility. Thanks for listening.